Good afternoon, Treasury Talent community. This is Joe Grabowski, joined as always by Simon Lynch and Scotty John. Today we are very, very fortunate to be joined by Rayan Rafay, the COO and CFO at Fraction. Rayan, nice to talk to you again. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. Simon, what's up in Australia?
Well, we're fortunate that we're not in the burning California market like Rayan. I can see the smoke in the background there. So no, we're actually just in the springtime. So it's definitely not seeing the same sort of things as Rayan.
And Scotty, what's going on in the mountains?
Well, day before yesterday was I think 80 degrees. Yesterday was epic record winds and snow. But that's just another day in Salt Lake City.
Perfect. And as always, anytime here in Michigan after Labor Day, we're desperately clinging on to whatever is left of summer. So with that, Rayan is joining us today to talk about the importance of partnerships, business partnerships, and how they impact Treasury. And we'll talk a little bit about how to develop those partnerships and change your mindset. So with that, let's just jump right into it. Scotty, what have you got?
Yeah, thanks again, Rayan, for joining us. Really excited to have you. And I think that the first question that I want to ask is just around mindset. So how would you say you build a mindset for success in a business partnership?
Yeah, I think it starts with, I think a lot of people have said this, but I characterize it as an abundance mindset, which is that you're not living in a world of zero-sum games. I think particularly with those in finance, and if you do FX swaps and interest rate swaps, you're used to thinking about zero sums. And we really all benefit as people, as communities, as departments from learning from one another and having that open mindset that by helping others, by opening things up, you're not going to lose anything. And I think it's often a cultural sort of remnant of how banking used to be or finance used to be that makes people a little bit territorial, almost without even being conscious of it. And I think that consciously thinking about what are the opportunities here for me to learn from others, what are the opportunities here for me to learn and teach, and that if I teach, that there will be some benefit for me in the future, but I don't need to think about that. I need to think about the fact that I'm able to help others and assist others. And I think what also comes from that is a natural ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes. Very often people in Treasury will get a question from someone in a business unit or in marketing, and there is and there can be a tendency of, well, that's a dumb question, or why do they not know that? And I think stepping back and remembering that what you live and breathe, what you know in and out, isn't what people look at every day. And so if they only look at something that you look at every day, once every 3 weeks or once every 6 months, they're going to forget. We all do. And so I think having that tolerance and thinking through, okay, why is this happening rather than this person's wrong or this person's different or this person's annoying me, I think are really just key cornerstones to having successful relationships with people. But that mindset starts from positivity, from abundance, and from openness.
So Rayan, what do you think then are the key skills that you need to develop in terms of being able to deliver those successful partnerships?
I think when you start talking about partnerships or just working with people, it all starts for me from listening. And listening is very different than waiting to speak. Right? Like listening is actually hearing someone, internalizing what they're saying, understanding why they're saying it. And the reason why that's critical, I think, is because you don't have the license or the authority to tell someone what to do or to make criticisms or give feedback if you haven't actually taken the time to understand someone else's position, where they're coming from, why they're coming from that, in order to be able to understand their situation and then be able to start, having a constructive conversation. And so I think it's on you as an individual to do that. And part of that listening and really hearing someone is being open-minded, is taking the politics out of the situation. And that skill to me is focusing on the objective, focusing on the goal. it's so easy to get mired in the detail of it in terms of who's going to get credit for this or who's reporting to who. You know, this isn't my job description. And I think focusing on the objective, which hopefully you work in a company where people are working together and collaborating, and the goal always needs to start from what do you have in common? And it's almost coming from diplomacy. And I think that is really a key skill set. If people want to read books from, you know, famous diplomats, that's a great place to start. But it starts from what do you have in common? And let's start from that rather than from what differences we have in order to get to a place where you can have a productive partnership.
No, and absolutely. I mean, you're talking about partnerships, you're talking about listening, you're talking about having that abundance mindset. These are normally things that aren't taught in academia or in schools. What was your journey on that? How did you go about developing those skills, and what would your advice be to someone else who is trying to develop those skills?
So I think the skills aren't taught at school, but they're learned at school. And what I mean by that is these are skills that are developed working together, living with people, playing together, right? It starts at the playground of sharing, and it moves on to whether you are involved in a sports team or you're volunteering, you have a hobby. And really what I think is important for people is to have hobbies, to get involved in things. So many times it's easy to say, oh, well, I'm too busy with work, or I'm too busy to do this, not understanding that, you know, we all in treasury or in finance are like athletes in the sense that, you know, an athlete who's good at soccer eventually hits a plateau, and then they've got to do weightlifting or yoga or something else to be better at soccer. And it's the same with business, and encouraging yourself, giving yourself license to be involved in a hobby, in a team sport, in camping, in working with your family, doing projects with your kids, is really where you develop that skill set of how do I navigate these situations when there's disagreements? What do we do when we're all equals? When there isn't a hierarchy of a CEO or a CFO telling you exactly what to do? And how do you make sure that you preserve your own sanity and you all end up liking each other at the end of it? And it could be as simple as doing an orienteering exercise. It could be as simple as sports. And in today's world, it could be playing online games. You know, a lot of online games have teams. And you have to navigate something with people that come from a completely different background from you and people that you've never met before. The good thing about, you know, well, I don't like saying good, but one of the outcomes of this COVID situation is that you're able to look at what have people been doing on the internet and collaborating with over the last few decades. And there's nothing more sophisticated and advanced than online gaming. And you may think, oh, that's just for teenagers, but I'd say go find something that you would like: strategy, war games, you know, whatever it may be, online sports. But leverage whatever you can to work with people from different backgrounds, be open-minded, and those skills are learned with practice. I don't think it's something you can read in a book and say, I know how to collaborate, I know how to have a good mindset. It's when you disagree with someone, you know, in a situation that you feel passionately about, navigating it so that you both don't hate each other or you come to a brawl or throws is learning the skill. And similarly with kids, when you're teaching your kids, right, how to share, you know, it's like mastery of a skill is learned by teaching it. And that's no more true than using your kids as the guinea pigs in that as well.
And Rayan, that's a really good point that you make. Like, we're obviously in a COVID situation at the moment, and virtual and doing things, you know, not face to face is new to us all, and we're all adapting really quickly. But how do we get the skills and be able to do this partnership successfully when it's virtual?
I think that with virtual, we just all have to put more effort into it. You know, I'm sure you guys feel the same way as I do, which is my brain is overworked on Zoom or whatever medium you're using, because I feel like my brain's looking for the cues that I normally look for when someone's in front of me, the nonverbal, and it just takes more effort because sometimes your screen may be grainy, right? Or you phase in and out, or I can't see your hands. And a lot of that just adds fatigue. And I think that mixing it up to whatever degree you can, you know, having walk-in chats rather than all video all the time, but connecting as often is really critical, and sometimes more often. And I think that it's equally important to have chats that are about nothing. the same things you would do when you're tired of working and you get up to go get a snack in the kitchen, or go chat with someone. You need to do that in your workday, and you need to do that with your coworkers. You need to build those relationships that aren't just about the project you're working on or the deliverable, but you need to know these people as people. I would even encourage people to have meetups where you're meeting with your spouse or significant other or whomever's important in your life with a coworker, and actually have those interactions. Socialization is something we all need, and we now know that more than ever, but we have to make do with what we have. And if that's virtual, then so be it. And there's little things you can do, right? Like use DoorDash or Uber Eats or whatever food delivery app you have based on where you are in the world, and order the same thing. Have it delivered to both people, and the company should have budgets for this, and then share a meal together, eat the same thing as you chat. There's all sorts of things you can do. Online quizzes with your team, sort of trivia pub night with teams, and collaborating in that way. You just have to make the effort in a way that you wouldn't ordinarily. And then we all have to be conscious of the fact that because our workstations are at home, we're now never away from work. And it's hard to step away. And so if that's true, bring in these casual social events into your workday, right? Have that socialization in the middle of the day, because I think employers all recognize that workers are as productive or more. But what we don't know right now is the mental cost of what we're going through. And whatever you can do to make it feel a little bit less stressful, a little bit more fun, I think is very important. And on the whether it's whether you're doing it internationally or not, I think is also really, really important. And I don't want to make this political, but I would say that one of the outcomes that is important from Black Lives Matter is there was a movement in multinationals and companies towards this idea of we don't see race, and so we assess talent and we assess merit. The problem with that is you don't see the person. Right. And so the outcome that has happened that I think is a positive is recognizing that you don't see the person if you don't see their race, their background, what state they're from, what sports they like. This is part of who they are. And so you need to acknowledge that the race, the ethnicity, the sexual orientation of your friends. It's offensive if you have someone who happens to be gay in your workforce and you never ask them about their personal life. And, you would ask other people. And so you have to embrace people for who they are, the religious traditions they have, the holidays they have, if they wear a headscarf, if they have a turban on. And getting to know them is really important. And I would say that's even more important virtually. And the good thing about that, and the good thing about practicing that today virtually, is then internationally doing it is so much easier, right? And if you're building a business that's international, we have that diversity in the United States. We have that in Australia and Canada. All these countries are very diverse. And so you have this practice set of being able to understand working with different people from different backgrounds, different communication styles. And it enables you need to look at it as an opportunity to be able to do that internationally. And then it becomes seamless for you to operate in a borderless world.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Rayan, with regard to, that is one, I think you said it earlier, not looking at this positively, but if you find a silver lining, the fact that we're all getting practice at virtual, it is, going to improve our interactions with people overseas and cross culturally, because we're now all getting practice with these tools, right? So, but it's also a really good segue, I think, to your point about, just noticing the differences in people. It's a great segue into how do you build an effective team? So obviously for us specifically, it's around treasury, but when you're looking at the finance organization, how do you go about building a team? And again, just to stay on theme here as it relates to partnering, business partnership.
Yeah, I think as leaders, what it's really important to note, and I sort of learned this over time, is your employees, your team, they notice everything, literally everything. And so simple things like if you're the treasurer, how much time do you spend with the controller? Are you friends, or is it a hostile relationship? How much time do you spend in each other's offices, if you have offices, or in meeting rooms, right? That kind of signal starts at the top in terms of, are we a collaborative organization? Why should Treasury sit together? Is there any reason, especially now that we're getting comfortable with remote work, when we get back together, why not throw the finance team, in a hodgepodge? Why not hotel? And let people interact with people that they wouldn't ordinarily interact with. Let's not get people comfortable with, well, I've sat beside this treasury clerk for 25 years, and if you move me, I won't know what to do with myself. We have an opportunity with remote working to say, let's actually force our teams to mix. Simple things like lunch roulette, right? Like the idea of pairing randomly 4 people every week to grab lunch and have a conversation, get to know each other, learn about what they're doing and how you guys can work together. Similarly, across the organization as a whole, I think it's really helpful, and something I've found really valuable is designating individuals to be the liaison for individual departments. And that could happen on a finance level if your treasury team isn't large, but if your treasury team is large enough, you could do it within that. And this has multiple benefits in that treasury person understands that business unit better, but they also have a human relationship with treasury. And so you can really embed yourself in that department, understand what they do, what they don't do, again, the listening piece of it, but then you're able to offer solutions. You're a solution-oriented department rather than just getting annoyed at people for, I'm closing my quarter and you just paid for a massive bill and didn't tell me about it, or you processed this invoice in the wrong way, or you coded it wrong. I mean, all those classic issues that people have with different departments become an opportunity to say, okay, let's work together and let's find ways that we can help you, and then rotate it. So eventually, after maybe 2 or 3 years, you've got a treasury department that understands the entire business. And that becomes really, really powerful, because I think I've said it to you guys before, treasury is the central nervous system of the company. Cash is what moves everything. And if you understand cash, you understand a business. And I think that enabling treasurers and treasury staff to understand it not only creates a killer department that will be able to add value to the entire company, but it makes those departments better off as well.
And you mentioned that Treasury is the central nervous system of an organization. In your experience, and I'm not trying to have you put anyone on blast or anything, but is partnership a challenge for Treasury?
I think it is. I think that Treasury is very often seen in an adversarial or an invisible position. And so I won't name who, but there's one of the largest tech companies in the world that didn't have a treasury department until they were at 100 billion market cap publicly listed. And so when you think about that, and then they realize that we're taking all of our revenue from credit cards. There's a lot better ways that we could do this. And I think that a lot of that happens because it is invisible. But I also think that a lot of people in Treasury are too comfortable being invisible. And so really, when we talk about the mindset, when we talk about being open-minded, Treasury really needs to build that within finance first and then across the company. Too often, the controller is on one side, the treasurer is on one side. They may not get along. They report separately to the board. They may not know what each other is presenting until they're at the audit committee presenting. There's a lot of challenges in a lot of companies, and I think that building that culture of collaboration is important. The other piece of it is Treasury is too often in a position where they're telling people what not to do. And I think that, or creating rules, or frameworks, or work for people. And I think that stepping away from that again and just listening to people is that opportunity of, we have processes and we may have reasons why we have those processes. There's, phishing, and there's anti-fraud, and there's all these things that we have to think about. We also have to think about our cash management, our cash balances, our covenants. There's all these things in the mind of a treasury team, but there's also simple solutions for working better with departments. And so I think at Treasury, start with that mindset, start with everything we've talked about. But if you don't do that, you immediately get into this adversarial position. And then it's about, let's just stop talking to each other and move on and get back to our safe treasury place, rather than let's work together and make this company we're part of better.
Forgive me. I think I'm up. So on that note, Rayan, I'm curious, we hear a lot about when we speak to Treasury professionals, this is anecdotal, but it seems pretty common that Treasury runs very lean. Now that's not always the case again, but most of the time that's the case. And so I guess the question is, is this, what do you think is the optimal size for a Treasury team, or does it even matter?
I think it's completely dependent on the business you're in. If your business is in some way money related, and that isn't just, by the way, financial services. It's also where, I was in Treasury and mining is in many ways a cash business, in a lot of ways. And so if there is a heavy cash component to the business, you have to have a pretty significant Treasury department. And then there's other businesses where, we're in a world that's more and more modularized, right? Where people are outsourcing marketing, people are outsourcing, development on the engineering side. They're outsourcing Treasury in certain cases. And I think we'll see a lot more startups that will be Treasury in a box for companies where they can't justify having a Treasury department. And Cabbage, Cabbage with a K that just got bought by American Express, that was kind of their vision, is being Treasury for small businesses. And so I think we will see a lot more of that. At the same time, there really isn't a substitute if you're large enough to having an internal team. But I think that in terms of everything we're talking about, in terms of building partnerships, I don't think size is relevant as much as it's a change in strategy, right? Like if you're a 3-person Treasury team, you have no choice but to, build partnerships and integrate with people. But if you're a 50-person team, it's very easy. It's very easy to take over an entire floor. It's very easy to never see anybody outside of Treasury on a regular basis. And I've been in those places. I've seen those places where, someone in Treasury will meet someone from another department and be like, oh, I didn't know you work here. And it's like, oh, how long have you been here? 15 years. And you really don't want to have that, right? And so I think that as with anything, as an organization increases in size, you just have to be more thoughtful, more methodical about this as leaders. And that means forced interaction, forced partnership at the high level, right? At the top level, encouraging it, right? Are you in a culture that rewards curiosity, right? If someone in Treasury asks a finance question, are they told, you're not an FP&A, why are you asking? Or are you in a environment where it's like, oh, you finally care about what I'm doing. Come on in, let's talk about it. And obviously on the former, I'd say just leave, right? And if it's the latter, like, great, you can build a career there, But I think that it just changes your strategy in terms of whether you're a big team or a small team. But building partnerships is fundamental to Treasury. I don't think Treasury can actually be successful, and it almost relegates itself if you don't do that, if you don't build those partnerships, if you don't show your relevance in terms of solving problems, in terms of taking real business problems and saying, well, here's our perspective and how we think we can help you.
So Rayan,
don't be a cost center, That's like kind of the simple thing, is don't be a cost center.
So Rayan, on the back of that then, as a treasurer, how can you go about training and developing your people so that they're more successful around business partnership?
Yeah, I mean, I think training is almost more important than compensation. Like, I can't think of something more important today than training, because the world is changing so quickly that learning how to learn is the #1 skill, I think, period. There's no more important skill than that today, because what is Treasury today will likely be 80% automated, 20 years from now. And so if you're not adapting and expanding and recognizing that this role is always going to be changing, then you're going to be left behind. So for a company, you want to optimize your talent. You don't want humans doing what automated processes should be doing, and you don't want automated processes doing what you think humans should be doing. And that's so important. So learning how to leverage technology, learning how to work with people, learning other parts of the business are all that part of training. I'm a huge believer in sort of non-official training, which is kind of like what we talked about, integrating yourselves into a department, having people talk to each other, having them teach things. But you also have to supplement that with real, formal training. And part of that is the soft skills and part of that is the hard skills. And I think that as managers, you need to be very deliberate about that. And it is a key place of differentiation. I mean, you guys know this, I'm sure, better than I, but I would guess that employee after employee will say, if you pay me the same as another company, but if you give me continual training and opportunities to make myself better, then I'll stay forever. And I think that when you think about how difficult it is to find good talent, when you think about how much you want to keep good talent, then training is the key to all of that, I think. And it's funny, when you think about it as an employee, especially in this market where a lot of people have lost their jobs, it's very easy to think about, well, I just want to work anywhere. And, I just want a job opportunity. And I understand that. But what's interesting about that is the minute the tables are turned and you're an employer, you want to do everything you can to keep the talent you have. Because the more service-based we are, the more we rely on technology, the more that technology rolls up into one or less human beings, and the more critical they are. And so humans become more important the more we use technology, as long as they're learning and adapting their skill set. And so you have to keep those people by keeping them current.
That makes sense. And so the training, the development, making sure that Treasury professionals are forming partnerships. How, in your opinion, can automation and technology support those partnerships? I know we had talked about a little bit earlier with Zoom and the various mediums there, but what else can be done, I guess? What other opportunities do you see?
Yeah, I think it's actually a really, really exciting time to be in Treasury, because we're just at the infancy of automation of effectively so many things that Treasury does, in terms of manual processes and reconciliations, how you close a month end with accounts, with accounting, how you do planning and forecasting with FP&A. So much of this is at a critical juncture where data science is going to become more critical, and leveraging the data that's coming from your sales, your ERP system, but not just that, your CRM tool, your website has so much analytics on it now, depending on what you sell. And if it's not that, even if you're, something as old fashioned as an oil business, the amount of analytics you get about where that ship is, where the refinery is, where you're selling your product, what are your customers buying, what is the quality of that oil, is the same as if you have a consumer e-commerce website and where those eyeballs are. And being able to better forecast, cash forecasting, being able to better plan, being able to better optimize the balance sheet, being able to put things into money market funds is all going to rely more and more on Treasury. But the big thing that I think Treasury is not quite there yet on is everybody is still looking for these all-in-one solutions. And they haven't built their business or their processes to understand that we've become, again, modularized. There's going to be the world's best, wiring app, and there's going to be the world's best reconciliation app, and there's going to be the best accounting close app, and then there's going to be a separate one. And making sure they all work together in open architecture with open APIs is going to be critical. But if you're thinking about how to plan Treasury in the future, you really need to think about an architecture that allows you to insert and remove pieces of it. You can't be attached to one provider anymore, and the dependencies and the cost on your business, because maintaining one universe of ecosystem is not only untenable from those software providers' perspective, it's a huge risk for treasuries, departments, and businesses. And so I think automation will allow people to have more time. That's really the key, and to build those relationships and those partnerships rather than being in the weeds for 5 days after a quarter end because you've got to go report something. And when you're negotiating simple things, like when you're negotiating a debt facility, if you're doing it on the blockchain, it's going to be a lot simpler. The pricing is going to be more transparent. The covenants are going to be more transparent. Tracking your covenants, working with the rating agencies, the reporting that you give them, it's all going to be automated. And that will give you the opportunity to think about the strategy, the vision of Treasury, and what role it plays in making the company more successful. Marketing analytics is an area in terms of customer acquisition, in terms of lead time from when a lead is generated to when someone is paid, is really rife for Treasury involvement. And I haven't seen very many companies that have actually involved Treasury in marketing analytics in being able to optimize their funnel for customers. And these are all things that treasurers can do the minute they've automated more and more.
And I never even thought about the marketing analytics piece, but you're right. It does impact so many different areas with cash flow forecasting. I mean, when you have an idea of, all right, this person has decided to buy, the money's actually coming in and we can actually work with it X amount of days afterward. There's power in that. I mean, that's that's being strategic right there. And that's knowing and understanding your business to the points that you made earlier.
Yeah,
So,
and a good example of that is there's a startup called Clearbank, and they're providing lending based on marketing. So based on the performance of your marketing campaigns, they're willing to basically fund your marketing campaigns. And if you think about that in a treasury context, the treasurers aren't actually evaluating this. The marketers are evaluating, whether Clearbank fits or not. In some cases, it's finance, but this is a treasury problem. And it's sort of the definition of a treasury problem. And as more and more companies rely on, AdWords, Facebook marketing, Instagram marketing, this is all quantitative data and the performance is predictable. And if you have that, how does treasury optimize cash for a business? They have to be part of that conversation. They have to be thinking about those solutions and those innovations. And I would love to see more and more treasurers being invited to the table for those discussions.
oh, that's awesome. So one question from the audience comes from Kushal. Kushal, thanks for your question. There's a lot of talk about treasurers and treasuries being strategic partners to the business. If I'm a young treasury professional and I'm hearing all of this, what advice or I guess what steps would you take as a young treasury professional to become a more strategic partner to the business? What can you start doing today?
I'll tell you what I did, which is, I think trying to understand when people ask you questions, you can take them literally, or you can try and think of what are they trying to get out of this, right? And that's most critical when you're reporting to the CFO or the treasurer or the CEO, is if they're asking you their cash balance, right? You can give them the answer, simple question, right? Or you can say, here's the cash balance. This is what moves it the most over the last week. And there's this other large purchase coming up in the next 3 days that's going to move it here, and little things like that, just adding a little bit of flavor or detail. You're going to be known as the person who understands the business. You're going to be known as the person who can provide insights, not information. And that will allow you to just become more and more of a crux in the organization where they depend on you more, and then opportunities come, questions come. I got involved in M&A. I got involved in really strategic discussions. I got involved in building a mine out of treasury, out of planning how we market and sell some of our minerals, how we track our logistics. I got involved in so many random things just because of that effort to say, what are they asking and why are they asking? And sometimes ask them, right? You don't have to do the guesswork all the time. People are always happy to answer these types of questions, especially if you're young and keen. Everybody loves someone who asks a few detailed questions, right? And the context is always, you've asked me this twice, so I'd love to understand, what exactly you're looking for, what your concerns are, because then I can make sure that, I take care of those, or if I see something, that I bring that information to your attention right away. Having those conversations is something that I think you just need to remove the fear away from. These are all human beings. They hired you. You're employed still, so they like you. And just engage with them in that. Now, don't do that right before they have a meeting with the CEO or with the board and not leave their desk. Take social cues. I think it's harder with Zoom not to interrupt someone, for example, especially if there's a bit of a lag, but just be thoughtful about it.
That's great advice. I mean, it's very succinct, and you're able to give real world examples. And now you're sitting at the C level. So I mean, I think any young treasury professional, or it doesn't really matter the level. Just listen, understand the problem, try to help people solve it. I mean, that's been the theme of the conversation throughout, and obviously it's worked out very well for you. And we hear stories like this all the time, and those are the people where it's just like, yep, they get it. This is a well-rounded treasury professional who can be a strategic partner to the business.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm looking, and I think we are all set. So Rayan, thanks again. We're gonna take you off the hot seat. It was good catching up with you, good talking to you, and certainly appreciate your insights and the experience that you shared. So with that, Treasury Talent community, thanks for tuning in. As always, you can catch us next Wednesday or Thursday if you're in Australia, but it'll be 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, and 8 a.m. for Melbourne and Sydney. So with that, thanks a lot, everyone. Take care.
Thanks so much, everyone. Take care, guys.